Hey everybody, Andrew here. So today's blather is about the Kayfun Lite in particular. Many of you will have heard of it before, many of you will have seen it before. It's, I suppose, what could you say? It's a sort of, a high-ish end rebuildable atomizer in that you basically make your own coils to actually put in it. But it has got a tank on it, so that means that when you get it set up right, you can put a decent amount of liquid in it and it can head off with you for the day. The other good thing about the Kayfun is the fact that it is basically pretty much leak proof. Now in some situations, if it gets too hot and there's a change of pressure within the chamber, it can sort of let a little bit of liquid out, but generally speaking, it's a very, very safe one to bring out and about with you. Now for me, to a large extent, that's the holy grail, because I was using all sorts of other bits and pieces and they just leaked. So settled on the Kayfun. I have no doubt there are other things out there just as good. And really this sort of review tutorial isn't about, that it's the best or anything like it. All I'm saying is that, for me at the moment, it's what I like to vape on. Yeah, it goes with me pretty much everywhere. So first of all, what does it look like? Well, in its native state, this is what it looks like. This is how it comes, the Kayfun Lite. Now, as you can see here, this is all stainless steel and it's brushed metal. Now, there's also, for this center section here, there is also a clear section that can be put in. And this is the clear section. So that means that obviously when it's all metal, you can't actually see what's left inside the tank. Whereas with the clear section in it, you can do. So for me, I tend to have the clear section on it. Also with the Kayfun Lite, it's quite handy in that you don't have to use the original drip tip that comes with it, although it is excellent. It's got quite a small hole at the top of it, which is, I think designed to basically make the flavour even more intense as it goes in. I personally prefer a slightly bigger one, a larger opening on it. So the one that I have on this one here is I've just basically swapped it out and put in another one of my drip tips in it. And as you can see from this one here as well, I've got the clear section, so I can see exactly how much liquid is in it. So one of the big issues with any of these rebuildables, and you hear a lot about the Kayfun and people saying, well, you should wick it this way and make the coil that way, and having wicking issues, having this, that and the other. Now I've gone through quite a number of different ways of building a coil for it, and I've settled on one which seems to work better than the rest of them. Now that's only for me, and what you need to do is go and have a look out there at all the other videos, Mark Todd's videos. There's plenty of them out there, because frankly there's many ways of skinning a cat, and frankly there's probably even more ways of skinning a Kayfun, if you like. So what I'll do now is we'll go down close, we'll have a look at it, I'll show you how I do it, but please remember, this is just what works for me. It could be something completely different for yourself, but let's give it a go. We'll go down close and see how it works. So here's the Kayfun. As you can see, it's all stainless steel, extremely well made, fantastic device altogether. So if we just take it apart and we can see what the various different sections hold. First of all, we take this one off here, the bottom. So we have this piece here, which is the deck that you actually put your coil onto. Then we have a chimney here, a cylinder. It comes off here, put that there. Then we have the chimney head. Then we have the rest of it here. And if we take off the various different sections, this is the bottom ring which fits onto the deck, if you like. Then we have the center section here, which, as I said before, there's also a plastic version of it so that you can actually see in and see what's going on. And then we have another ring on top of that. And then we have the cap. And then we have the drip tip. So that's essentially how it's made up, and just so you can see it there, there's our clear center section there. Now, to give you some idea of scale, all of these squares on this are 1 centimeter square, so that gives you an idea as to the sort of size that these things are. So, now, when it comes to recoiling, if we move all of these pieces out of the way, this is obviously the bit that we need to be doing the work on. Now you can see it's like very, very many of the other atomizers that are out there. It's got 2 screws, negative post, positive. There's an air hole underneath there. And then there is also an air hole here, which means that there's no air hole actually required at the bottom, so it can actually sit flush on whatever it is that you want to put it on. And then this particular one, unlike the previous or the still available Kayfun 3.1, this one actually fills from the bottom from this hole here, so it's just a case of just simply when it's put together, you unscrew this, you can fill it up, pop the screw back in, and happy days, you're all done. So let's give this a go and we'll see how I do a coil on it. As I said, many different people do it many different ways, but let's see what happens with my particular version. Right, so what do we need to make up a coil for a Kayfun? Well, I've got some silica rope here. This is braided rope. It's excellent, I must say. It's very good. As you can see, it's been sort of woven or whatever, so that means that it's just easier to sort of manage and handle. This is 2 mil. We've got some wire here, which is Kanthal D wire. This is 0.20. It's a fairly thin one. You could certainly do with a thicker one on this, but I don't tend to go for sub-ohm coils or whatever. I like my coils to be up around the sort of 1.8, 1.9, 2 kind of ohm area, something like that. We've obviously got our deck that we have to work on here. Got nail clippers just to cut the wire and to cut the rope, etc. And then we've got a micro screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, which we'll need to put this whole thing together. So let's get started and I'll show you how it is I do it. So here we go. Let's see what we can do with this. As I said, we've got our wire here, which I've flamed just to sort of take the tension out. You don't have to do that, but I think it certainly helps. It also, if there's any impurities at all in it, it helps to just burn them out beforehand. So what we're looking for is an S shape. So if we basically flatten this a little bit and then just push it into an S shape like so. Kind of difficult to show it here. Now, I want that S shape to be about 2 centimeters long, so it's going to be something like that. Alright, so from there to there. So what we then do is we just pinch it, and what we then need to do is wrap the wire around it. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. Okay, and pull it out this side, and then that one is pulled out this side. So essentially what we're left with is something that looks like that. Now what I tend to do is I wrap it so that I have the leads coming out on either side, where I have this lying across the top and this one lying across the bottom. Now as you can see, because we have a wire coming out both sides, you can see that we've got 3 loops here, but if you turn it over you can see there's actually 4 loops there. So you'll see sometimes people referring to 3-4 coils or 4-5 coils. That tends to be to do with what we see here. So this is a 3-4 if you like. Now what we're going to do is we're going to basically sit this onto this so that it's running over that air hole in the middle. So what I'll do now is I'll just get myself a micro screwdriver and we'll try and set this thing up and see how it performs. Now we've loosened up the screws here and here, so they're ready to take the wires. So basically what we want to do is lay this over the top, over that air hole, and with one wire, this one on the left, just going to wrap that in underneath it, tighten it up, so that is caught there. And then the other one, as you can see here, that is, we've now wrapped under there, and we can tighten that one up as well. So what we end up with is the coil suspended over the air hole like so. We'll just go ahead and tighten the screws a little bit more, like so. And we'll check it now in a minute, but that should be giving me, 0.2 Kanthal. That should be giving me probably about 1.9, possibly 2 ohms, something like that. Now, we've got some surplus that's going on here, but first of all, we need to check where these loops are actually going, because as I said beforehand, we want these loops to actually just touch above where the channel is here. If it goes down too far, it'll block it, which means that you'll have wicking problems. So that's something that we need to do now. Now what I'm going to do is, at this stage, I'm going to get rid of these wires. As you saw this earlier on, we have the Vapors multi-tool, which is the nail clippers. So let's get those out of the way. So they're now gone. Now, what I'm going to do is just turn this down here, as you can see, just to see where that's fitting. And as you can see, that is just about touching the deck at the bottom, but not enough to actually block the hole. So that's pretty much perfect. On the other side, we're going a little bit long. As you can see, that's going to be getting in the way. So what we can do is, we can shorten that by holding the wires and gently pulling this back a little bit. Now that should be about right for what it is that we need to do. So now that we've got our lengths right and things are looking okay, what I want to do is get rid of this bottom piece here. So again, take out the trusty nail scissors, clip it off. Okay, and then just let's check there, and yes, that should be just about right. And on this side here, all we want to do is, again, we can get rid of this part here. It's not necessary. So that's what we're left with, something like this. And as you can see, very neat. Neither side, when it goes down, is going to block the holes. Now, what's really important here is to make sure, I don't know whether you can see this, but what's really important is that the coils here do not touch the air hole underneath. They need to be above it. Now, depending on what your vaping style is, etc., etc. Some people like it higher above, some people like it a little bit closer to. Something like this as a setup is pretty much fine for me. So let's now just stick it onto something so we can see what ohms the actual coil is. So we got it on a Provari here, and let's see. And it's 1.8, that's what it's reading, which for me is pretty much perfect. What I tend to do now as well at this stage is just burn it a bit. As we can see, that's glowing nicely there. No issues there at all. And I do find that before you put your liquid on and, you know, stuff like that, it's always worthwhile just giving them a little bit of a burn just to make sure that everything is as it should be. So, what to do next? Right, well, what we'll do is we'll take this off here. Next piece to go on is the cylinder. So the cylinder piece, this is this here. So we're actually going to put this on, but what we want to do is make sure that as we're putting it on, that we don't mush the wick down either side. You know, we want to keep it in a fairly good position. We also need to make sure that when we're pushing it on, that we don't push the coil down. And I forgot to mention, by the way, you know, these coils are pretty much okay, but if they're touching or anything like that, just use a little screwdriver, you know, just to space them out, just to make sure that, you know, everything is nice and even. So stick this on here. Now what I tend to do is just help it in there like that. And we can screw that on there like that. So you can now see what that looks like in there. Really one of the big things with Kayfuns is, you know, you don't want loads of wick in there. It really doesn't need it. So something, you know, along those lines should have you working really nicely. Let's see, have we got a little bit of, let's just put a little bit of liquid onto it, and we can just check now before we fill the whole thing up to make sure that, you know, it's doing what it's meant to do. Stick it on the Provari here, and as we look here, yeah, there's no issues there at all. That's doing exactly what it's meant to do. So, next thing to go on is the chimney section. That screws on simply like that there. Okay. Then we have a base piece going on. Now, of course, I probably should have assembled the whole outer part so that you can actually just put it all in one piece, but that would be far too organised. Okay, we put on the clear section because that's what I want in this particular case. Pop that on. Pop on the next section there. Then we're putting the cap on, and as you see with the cap, there's a little rubber O-ring in there. Make sure that that O-ring is there. It can on occasion fall out. Generally it's okay, but if it does fall out, you know, you're going to have problems, so make sure that that's there. These things tend to come with a number of different extra O-rings and stuff like that, so you shouldn't have an issue. Then we just put that onto there, screw that on, then we can put on the drip tip. So that's us complete. Now all we need to do is just take out the screw, the filling screw, and fill it up. Now when filling Kayfun Up, you need to sort of make sure that you don't overfill it. It works on a pressure system, so you put too much liquid in there and it sort of just messes around with the system and you can get some sort of leakage or whatever. You can fill pretty much from any bottle nowadays, you know, with this new system here. It used to have to be on the older one, it's still up for sale, and it's still a fantastic machine, on the 3.1 Kayfun, that you'd need a specially tipped bottle. With this one you don't. You can use a syringe, or you can use any kind of bottle really, as long as it'll fit into that slot there. Now I'm going to use what actually came with the 3.1 Kayfun, so it's a kind of like a needle tip bottle. So what we do is, the best way to fill these things is upside down and at a bit of an angle. Now the way you can tell that you're almost full and to the right sort of level is that you'll see the liquid going in, and eventually, and you do this slowly, you don't try and sort of lash the stuff into it, you'll eventually see that it starts filling up here. And when it gets to about here, and you can still see a little bit of a bubble on top, that's your time to stop. That's when it's pretty much full. So let's see what happens here now as I fill it. Okay, so that's filling away. Again, there's no point in rushing this as a process. It's all you're going to potentially do is just let's see, how are we doing there? We've got a little way to go. Yeah, you rush it and you end up just getting leaks and stuff like that, which isn't any fun. So there we go, there's our bubble coming. You can see it there. That's it. That's pretty much exactly where we want to have it. So after that, it's just a case of pop the screw in. To be perfectly honest, quite often this is the trickiest part of the whole way. Look at that, got it right first time. Screw that in there, and Bob's your uncle. There we go, a full Kayfun Lite, which has just been recoiled. So that's it. There we go. Just stick it on here now onto Pravari. See what it's like. Sometimes it can take a little bit just to get it going or whatever. Another tip is that if it seems to be a little bit dry, if it's not wicking quite right at the beginning, the little air hole that we have here, what you can do is just take, just have a quick go and a quick pull on it, but put your finger over this. What that'll do is actually draw some extra liquid into the chamber, but you have to be really careful, because if you do too much of it, you'll end up flooding it and you'll get gurgling and all the rest of it. So let's see what it's like. Yeah, absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Now it's important when you actually, put the thing back together that you kind of prime it by putting, a little bit of liquid onto the wick. What can also happen is it can take a little while for it to really sort of, bed down and be, exactly what it should be. Now, Kayfuns are very well known for their fabulous flavour and, the vapour and everything like that. So if at the beginning, it's not as perfect as you expect it to be, give it a little while, because it just needs to bed down. Like most coils, they're there a little while and it, they just get better as time goes on. Now there's certain liquids, obviously, with all coils, that tend to gunk the coils up quicker than others. Some of the, the thicker kind of liquids, the sort of the vanilla custards, some of the really heavy tobacco ones, in a lot of cases it's, some of the sweeter ones do it as well. So what happens is after a period, it ends up that you're getting no bloody taste out of the thing anymore. And, you start thinking, Jesus, well, is it that the liquid's gone, or it's not any good, or, what is it that's actually going on? Well, it's very, very simple to sort out. And basically what you need to do is just drain the liquid out of the Kayfun. And to do that, there are a couple of methods. The easiest one to do is to essentially, if you have a bottle, the original bottle that you actually got your liquid in, what you can do is drain the liquid out through here. And the way you do that is you literally unscrew the top piece here, just this little top piece here. You unscrew that slowly, and then you pull it out as soon as it disengages. And what will happen then is that the pressure will be released and the liquid will then flow from this into the bottle, right? So you lose very, very little of it, okay? Then you can take the whole thing apart and give it a clean if you want. Don't get rid of the coil. The coil will last more than, one or two goes. Now, what you need to do is dry burn it, and essentially that means, you strip it all back so that you've actually just got the coil there, and then you can wash the coil out. And then at that point, once you've done that, get some paper towel, dab it onto the wick, to get as much of the moisture out of it as you possibly can, and then basically pulse it. So put it back onto your mod, hit the button, you'll hear all sorts of hissing and whatnot, and that's it, just getting rid of the water that's in there. But do that, not continuously, but sort of pulse it, a few seconds each time. And eventually you'll see the coils starting to glow red. You'll see that they're sort of a bit gunked up at the beginning. They usually look sort of blackish or whatever. But, you know, in a very short period of time, all of that black gunk sort of burns off it, and can be blown away. It's just like dust or whatever. And you'll end up with a lovely, fresh coil, which will be good for another week or two or whatever it is, depending on what it is that you're vaping. So then you can basically just put the thing back together again, fill it up with your liquid, and off you go again, and that'll be good for another quite a few days. Again, very much dependent on the liquid that you're actually using. So all in all, you know, the Kayfun, is it easy to recoil? Yeah, well, it is. You know, I think all of these things are a little bit daunting at the beginning. Certainly when I started looking at recoiling stuff, it scared the living daylights out of me. But, you know, listen, it's not like you're there in front of a huge load of people and having to perform, you know, and show them exactly what's going on. You know, it's trial and error. You know, I have a certain way of doing it. There are lots of other people who do it other different ways or whatever. Look, it's a bit of wick, it's a bit of wire. It's worth the experimentation. It saves you a fortune in the end, because wick is relatively inexpensive and wire costs next to nothing. So literally, you know, for a few quid, you can have supplies that'll last you a lifetime. But it's worth sort of doing a bit of research and seeing which one's actually going to work best for you. So Kayfun, for me, one of my favorites. It just works. It works really, really well. Fairly well, easy enough to wick, and looks pretty good as well on pretty much everything. So what I would say is it's certainly worth considering. So, but do your research. Go out and look at all the other videos that are out there. There's many people who've done them on the Kayfun. Different wicks, different, you know, ways of going about it. This is mine. Hope you enjoyed it and found it a little bit educational, and talk to you again soon. Cheers.